My second playthrough confirmed it. Naughty Dog completely botched the most controversial plot twist in The Last of Us Part 2. I've been bothered by this for years, and in this video I'm going to explain exactly why. That single game-defining sequence hit me so hard that in the moment I couldn't even process it. But one thing remained, a nagging feeling that something about it was deeply wrong. The masterful presentation of The Last of Us Part 2 is likely why I was so forgiving of its storytelling during my first playthrough. Everything is presented at a technical level so high, it really shows Naughty Dog flexing its muscles once again. The presentation of the plot twist scene alone crackles with tension. The way the camera slowly wanders and Abby and her group position themselves around Joel is wonderfully composed. And the atmosphere is so thick you could cut it with a knife. In general, the breathless presentation did a damn good job of distracting me from the plot holes in the narrative. But even its brilliant, breathless presentation couldn't hide the fundamental flaws of the game's all-important plot twist. Too many things had happened by then that simply didn't fit together for me. To understand the failures of Part 2, we have to remember the foundation of Part 1, the characters of Joel and Ellie. We learned that Joel survived for 20 years by mastering two key skills: a deep-seated skepticism and the willingness to kill anyone who posed a threat. He was a ruthless pragmatist. In a world where the law of the strong prevails, any person can pose a potential threat. But despite his morally gray actions, the game made us connect with him and understand his choices. In Part 1, I found Joel's character believable and his actions understandable. The same is true for Ellie, a lovable 14-year-old with a unique immunity. She started as a naive burden and over the course of their journey evolved into Joel's lifesaver, all while holding on to her childhood innocence. After 18 hours, we knew these characters inside and out, and that's the key to understanding why Part 2 feels so wrong. With that knowledge and those expectations, we started The Last of Us Part 2. What happened next felt like a complete betrayal of the characters we'd come to love. Even before the big twist, I was already staring in disbelief at the choices the game made for the adult Ellie. I know 4 years have passed and survival changes people, but this Ellie felt fundamentally different from the one we knew. A character change that was just too hard to believe. I tried to accept this premise with a great deal of goodwill. As a fan of the first game, I was only somewhat surprised to take control of another character. In Part 1, it was Sarah, Joel's 12-year-old daughter at the beginning. Now we were controlling a pretty jacked protagonist who we would later learn is named Abby, and she wants to avenge her father, whom Joel shot in Part 1 to save Ellie from the operating table. Her physique was a massive credibility issue for me from the start. We're in a world where food is scarce and well rationed, yet she looks like a bodybuilder? How on earth did she get that jacked? Apparently, finding enough food and steroids to build that kind of muscle is easier than finding medicine. It's a shame because Abby never felt like she belonged in this world. This immediately caused me to feel detached from her character, and her fate didn't have the emotional impact it was meant to. just so there are no misunderstandings, I would have the same problem with a man with a Mr. Olympia physique. I think being brave and taking different paths is great, but it also has to make sense within the narrative. If the only reason for this was to create a greater contrast with the gaunt Abby, then that's not enough for me, just for the sake of spectacle. Why is she the only one in 2 entire games who looks like this? The inconsistencies continue, and we're only at the beginning of the game. The entire setup for Joel's demise feels like a series of narrative conveniences designed to force the plot forward. It's tough to believe that Joel, a master survivor who lived for decades by being vigilant and mistrustful, would let his guard down so completely. This feels entirely out of character for the man we know, especially after only 4 years. The narrative relies on a string of unlikely events: a sudden snowstorm, a conveniently placed horde of infected, and Joel stumbling upon the very people he wronged. Joel's survival instincts, honed over 2 decades, seem to vanish. Instead of using his home turf advantage to get to a safe house and interrogate Abby, Joel rides with her to her hideout, which happens to be closer. Yeah, sure. This isn't a tragic mistake. It's a sacrifice of a character for the sake of a plot device. It's a prime example of lazy storytelling to get to the main event as quickly as possible. Finally, before we get to the plot twist, let's talk about the way Joel dies. Joel doesn't get a quick death. We witness Abby blowing out his kneecap with a shotgun. While Joel's leg is being bandaged to keep him from bleeding out, Abby uses the time to find a golf club in the room to beat Joel to a pulp. This isn't just brutal, it's a cold, calculated act that makes it impossible to understand why we're supposed to sympathize with her later on. The extreme brutality of that scene immediately turned Abby into a monster, an impression that her subsequent story could never fully redeem. If she had simply shot Joel with a pistol, mirroring her father's death, the act would have been a cold, justified revenge, and we might have eventually accepted a fair is fair sentiment. The excessive violence here completely undermines that possibility. Naughty Dog is asking too much of me to develop understanding or even sympathy for Abby after such a cold-blooded murder, especially when they introduce her with such an excessively brutal scene. This creates a fundamental split in her character. The one we are forced to play, who shows a hint of humanity, and the monster who bludgeoned Joel. The problem is that the two sides of Abby's character fail to fit together from the very beginning. Up to this point, the game has been testing my patience, but the final, game-defining plot twist breaks the narrative completely. This decision makes no sense. In a world where leaving witnesses alive is a death sentence, a lesson Abby has surely learned. Ellie even screams a death threat in her desperation. Yet they still let her go. Their mercy towards Ellie and Tommy stands in stark contrast to their brutal, cold-blooded execution of Joel. Some might argue that Ellie and Tommy were innocent, but that doesn't fit with the brutal world we've been shown. At the very least, Ellie should have died to maintain the game's own grim logic. And then I ask myself, if Ellie had to live and Joel had to die, why didn't Naughty Dog find a better way to tell this story? Why did Ellie have to open the door so foolishly and mindlessly? In part 1, Joel taught her to act cautiously. We, as players, are given sneaking and moving slowly as gameplay element number 1 in both games, because otherwise it would mean certain death. Why didn't Naughty Dog create a narrative situation where Ellie, for example, takes on the role of a secret observer who has to watch helplessly as Joel and maybe even Tommy are killed right in front of her eyes? In my opinion, Abby would have acted justly in The Last of Us Part 2 if she had killed Joel in the same way he killed her father. And that would be with a shot from a pistol. Then this mercy towards Ellie and Tommy would also be much more understandable. Abby is not a cold-blooded killer and has, despite everything, preserved her humanity. It's clear Naughty Dog wanted a jaw-dropping shock moment, but in sacrificing all believability for that one scene, they completely shattered my immersion. I could of course try to justify all the plot holes and inconsistencies, forcing the narrative to fit. But why should I? Just to call it a masterpiece? No, it's not a masterpiece. It's a brave game with flawed storytelling, but undeniable good gameplay. Anyway, ultimately all of us who grew up with Mario know that video games aren't exactly known for good storytelling, but they can still be a lot of fun. Fun fact, The Last of Us Part 2 won Best Narrative at the Game Awards 2020. Exactly my kind of humor. Alright, that's my take. Did Naughty Dog really mess up the plot twist, or did it work for you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share the video with them. See you next time!